outside of Copilot, what tools have you found were critical to lawn maintenance businesses? We're big on Zapier. We're big on, what other tools, maybe in something that enhances Copilot, something outside of that that does more SEO for your site?
The basics are, QuickBooks just from an accounting perspective. I'm happy you already know Zapier, so that's fantastic. I would connect, for me personally, I like Jotform and Paperform as the custom form builders. I would then connect that using Zapier so you can do instant pricing from your website. So that you can collect resumes from your website. All this can be funneled directly into Copilot. For example, you can have applicants that come in. They come in through, say, a Jotform or Paperform. They're put as a customer type as an applicant, and then you run them through an automation. So when they apply, they're immediately getting a text. They're getting a text 3 days, 2 days, 1 days before a interview. They're getting text 3 days, 2 days, 1 day before their first day on the job. So we send out information about pay for performance, about ways to be able to make more money, all these aspects leading up to day one, because we know just because someone accepts the job offer doesn't mean they're showing up. And so we nurture them in the automations process just like we would a lead. So those would be like right off the top of my head, like especially if you know Zapier, I'd be like looking at those form builders. Down the road, we are going to have custom forms, a lot more customizable inside of Copilot. It's more like a 2026 thing though. So like I would still be leaning on Paperform, and like that's all they do. So there's so much cool stuff you can do. Like whether it be integrating with payment stuff, whether it be colors and your logo, etc. And it's relatively cost effective too, like $8-10 a month.
Awesome. Awesome. Very good. So back onto that, just what you were talking about, hiring. Do you find that, word of mouth, indeed.com? Well, how do you guys find employees? What's been successful?
Yeah, Indeed is still the best paid strategy. Once you have a larger team, referrals work really well, and I just incentivize it like crazy, like not like $100, like we're talking like 500, 1,000 or more. Because I'd rather give the guys money than Indeed. And then another thing you can do is use your email list to especially during your off season when you know there's not a lot of leads, to just get your bench of employees ready to go for the upcoming season. As well as you can't run job postings on Facebook, but what you can do, and usually we'll get through, assuming you don't go too hard on it, is you can just make a post that says like, "Hey, we're hiring for the upcoming season. You use hiring carefully. More like join our team." Put a whole bunch of pictures about you doing work, etc., and then just link it to that paper form or that jot form, or just directly to your website where there's a careers tab, and then they can sign up there. But just be careful with this one, because if you do a post like that, you can get flagged and they'll take the post down because they don't want job postings. But if you make it generic enough and then you just tell them to kind of go to your site, you can even say, hey, join our team this upcoming spring, see our website for details and to apply. And then just have pictures of all you guys doing the work, etc. Then the reason this is effective though is because then you can then boost that post, which I hate boost posts for marketing, but it boosts this post and then just target your area and then your demographic that you're targeting. So for example, like 20 to 40-year-old males, and I'm assuming that's kind of your demo. Great. Target just them, boost it to your 5-mile radius, and all of a sudden you're going to have applicants coming through. That seemed to work pretty well, but we are seeing they're getting better and better at screening those out. So you just be careful with using words like hiring, hire, compensation, salary, wages, things like that.
If things started going well, my partner has mentioned acquisition, growth by acquisition a lot. And I've also heard a lot of red flag warnings about growth by acquisition. And I was just kind of wondering if you could give me some pros and cons, or your thoughts on growth by acquisition.
Yeah, so this turnaround that I just posted an hour ago on my channel, I would watch that. He did
I
an
will tonight.
acquisition. What I'm really looking at when it comes to recurring customers, like mowing, cleaning, etc., is what's the customer acquisition cost? What am I paying as a premium because I'm getting it all at the same time? So if you can
Right.
go out and get a customer using door hangers for, let's just call it $50 to $100 per, are you willing to pay $300, $400, or $500 on an acquisition? Because really what you're doing is you're acquiring a customer. Now, also I have to discount it because I get them immediately. But I also have to bake in the fact that there's gonna be a percentage of them that don't stay with me once they transfer the business.
Exactly.
I also have to bake in the fact that if I don't make that customer acquisition cost back, now it's inflated. Let's call it $400 instead of $100. If I don't make $400 in gross profit from that customer, I actually lost money on that customer in the acquisition. So what I'd see is that, let's say someone's like, hey, I get a customer for $100 using door hangers, or $400 per customer if I go acquire someone's business. Well, if 20%
Okay.
of people are going to leave when I transfer the business. And then another 20% are going to leave in the next 3 to 6 months because they don't like my service. All of a sudden, I'm paying more around the lines of $750 per customer. Now, all of a sudden, it could take
Yeah.
me a year to recoup the
Right.
cost of that investment. And
Yeah.
so the vast majority of times, people are better off simply going out and doing marketing themselves. And so the
That's
only
what I
people that
thought.
would usually acquire are the ones that are not confident in scaling their marketing. Because if you can get a customer 50 to 100, yes, as you scale, you have diminishing returns if you're in a smaller market. So if I have diminishing returns, maybe I'm paying 120 or 150. So is it really worth paying the 600 or the $700? So in the video, like the day that went out, he's paying like $2,000 for customers. And now those are high value customers, $4,000 to $6,000 per year in revenue, but he can't upsell them into other services that he wants to because the contract. They take the fertilization. He can't upsell landscaping to the customers. So it's just a matter of like, well, a $4,000 customer, if you're 50% gross profit, it's going to take a year
Yeah.
to get that money back,
Right.
to recoup the customer acquisition cost. So if your churn is 33% a
Yeah.
year and you keep customers on average for 3 years, we
I
got
was
to
gonna
bake
say.
that number into it. It gets
Yeah.
really hard to make sense of it. So
Okay.
the vast majority of times I see people saying, I'm going to grow by acquisition. What it really means is they don't know how to acquire customers on their own and they don't know how to scale that. So I would take what you do with the 15,000 door hangers and then ask yourself, okay, what happens if I did 100,000? Because it might actually be a better deal than go out and buying the business.
The only thing is the reason that we're looking into that, or that I think he sees that as an option, is because I'm going to be the operator. I'm going to be the one on the sales guy and the operator. So as soon as I do the 15, I don't even know if I'll get through 15,000 door hangers before I'm too busy to be able to continue to do that. But we haven't tested any other markets. So in case the online marketing is saturated and that we don't know. We're not sure yet. We just have, I spent $400 on 2,500 door hangers in November. And from that, I have 12 recurring customers. I'm doing about 1,600 a month. I did about 4,000 in one-time jobs off of that. And that was enough to kind of convince them. And we've spent the last 2 months putting together a game plan and getting equipment together and uniforms and all that stuff. And
Yeah. So based upon that math, you're getting about one customer every 200 door hangers. And so it's just a matter of, okay, well, if I can do 100 door hangers per hour, that's 2 hours worth of labor. And then let's just call it $10 worth of a print cost. So if I'm paying someone $25 an hour, 2 hours plus $10, that's $60 per customer. And so you just
okay.
track that number. As you begin to scale, that number will go up. But if it gets to 80 or 90, I'm still much prefer doing that compared to paying $300 or $400 per customer if I go out and acquire
Exactly.
them from business.
Okay. One of my customers, I'm in South Florida, so his backyard is extremely sandy, and he wants a sod job done. I don't do sod, but I did call and get a quote from a company who would come in and do the topsoil, the sod, all that stuff for 5,600. How would you handle that in regards to the customer? What type of upcharge would you put on it? Would you be the one who hires the company to do it, and then just upcharge the company and kind of make it a three-party thing, or how would you handle that?
What are you doing in the job besides, are you just you just subbing the whole thing out?
Yeah, I don't plan on doing any other work really.
Yeah, it just becomes like, do you want to have this as your business model, right? Like I personally don't like doing subbing. Um, and I want to own the customer relationship from top to bottom. And if I'm not going to, I'm just not going to do the work. So it just comes down to, if you want to do subcontracting, like that is a business. If you tack on 10%,
Right.
15% or whatever, then it's a matter of like, do you hide that from the customer? Do you tell the customer? Do you like, are they going to be rolling with their
Exactly.
trucks and confusing the customer? So like, I've
Exactly.
typically not played with it. I think there are companies that their business model is subcontracting and they do a great job of making sure they have contracts in place. They know how to explain it to the customer. It's part of like their shtick. They are able to provide value to the customer in excess of just like a middleman that does absolutely nothing.
Right.
But you want to
I think
establish like,
sod is something that I would want to get into though, sod installs, because eventually I see the 3 to 4 year plan is landscape installation and hardscaping. And it's just because every single house down here eventually needs landscaping or hardscaping done. And I want to have the mowing as like the pay the bills type of a thing. And then we make the profit from the jobs. And I think sod is something that's going to be pretty big for us, and it's relatively easy because with a 4-man crew and a little dingo, you can get it done in a day. You can do 4,000 square feet. And I think that's something that we do want to have. So I wouldn't be there working, but I think I'd be there kind of learning a little bit. So I would be overseeing the job, but it wouldn't be, they wouldn't work for me necessarily, you know? So
Yeah.
I don't know how
I-
that would.
I'm not opposed to it. I just think that if right now your focus is getting more mowing customers, I just don't want this to be a distraction because if it's going to keep you up
Okay.
from 2 weeks away from doing door hangers and what that is the strategy. This is why like there's always 100 ways to skin the cat. Just figure
Right.
out one, right? So like that's my biggest concern is this going to be a distraction? You're going to make $1,000 when potentially you could spend 2 weeks doing more door hangers or your evenings and weekends. What you're worrying about this and making the estimate and all the rest of it. Just go out and get 20 more customers for mowing, and it might not make sense to go figure out this one job. So, when
So
you
you think I
want
should
to,
just sell that to the customer based on their estimate and then sell that to the company? Tell them that they just need to pay me and I already sold the job and just get rid of it?
you could, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the subcontracting model, right? And so as long as you're gonna be on this job site, like managing the whole job, like you're adding value. So as long as you feel good about that and the value you're offering, and you're basically subbing the job out.
Right. Right.
I would just be careful with this being a distraction from what you're currently doing.
Okay. All right.
So
For sure.
yep.
Thank you.
At what point does it make sense to have a resale permit? Should we have that now, or should we just keep baking it into the price that we're giving to the customer?
Yeah, so depending on the state a little bit, most states will require a contractor's license. So if you go to Department of Revenue or you just give them a call, just be like, hey, what do I need to do with a reseller's permit? They'll tell you. Most states are going to require a contractor's license. And so you might not want that. So that's why I put it off for a long time. But eventually it's like, okay, I'm going to get the contractor's license because I needed it for Google Local Services. And then any raw materials I started using it on. So just contact the Department of Revenue. They should hook you up.
Chase kind of like founded most of it last year, and then we kind of have three of us now for this year. So four of us total will be split between two trucks. We're all pretty bought in right now. And this year, like the three of us will be on profit share, not quite P for P yet, but we just didn't know how to split up roles and responsibilities outside of just the normal labor to kind of earn that profit share outside of just doing like the normal work. I mean, we were thinking like a person be in operations, sales, marketing, and admin, the three of us outside of that. Is that something that makes sense to you as far as like responsibility split to earn that profit share?
Yeah, so like at its mature state, sales, operations, admin being the three legs of the business are all overhead positions. And so that size of like you can have a 1.5 to $2 million business with that model. One person in the office full time, maybe they have an assistant, and then a salesperson, and then a GM type operations manager. So like, just keep in mind this is not going to happen when you're at 400,000. What it's going to look like is you might split it up now based on if you know who's good at what. You might break out, hey, your sales, your operations, your admin. Here's the task you're all responsible for. Oh, and by the way, this is going to make up like maybe 10% of your week. The other 90% of the week, we're in the field working. And so it just becomes a function of like I would do the organization now. Like, what does sales, operation, admin? What does each of those roles include in terms of tasks? And then what's likely going to happen is the admin role will probably become the first one that actually needs to work, 4 or 5 hours a day doing admin because that will scale the fastest as you get to say 5, 6, 700,000. But you don't need a full-time estimator year-round sales at that size. And so as you scale, it'll just be like, as long as you're all very much acutely aware that this is a matter of we will do more overhead tasks as is required. Because what I get scared of when people are like, oh, three of us are starting a business is everyone wants to be out of the field. And all of a sudden you have a $500,000 business with three overhead positions and that will never make money. And so that's why I'm careful. Just be careful of that. And then as long as you're all on the same page that you're going to get out of the field at different times, then I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I think that is something that we've talked about as far as I know, like what you talk about is at a certain point you're in a wasteland. You really only have like one person that's out of that work in the meantime, and I think that we try to keep that open now so there's no surprises later on and kind of take it as we go.
Yeah, good stuff, man.
Thank you.
So I've had a lot of trouble getting quality employees and keeping them for a long period of time. So that's been one of my biggest problems as of lately. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions for like training systems and a good interview process.
Were they making substantially more on P4P than base pay?
Well, the base pay was 1950. So when they were doing really well, they were making like 24, $25 an hour,
Mhm.
which was around like 90 or 80% efficiency.
And was that usually the case, or was like that like a one-off time? Like, were they usually hitting base pay?
Well, when the first guy started off, he had experience, so he was hitting it, and it was relatively regular. And then when a new guy came in, I had to train him, so it wasn't happening. But once he got in, once we all three got into the groove, and we were working together as a team as I was training them, it was happening regularly. And then once spring rush hit, well, my spring rush has already hit in here in Richmond, Virginia.
Mhm.
So this other guy, well, first of all, that first person left during the winter. I wasn't able to keep him. He wasn't excited about only getting $500, every week. So the most recent person who left, he was making really good money when we started mulching. So he was making like $25 an hour while he was doing that. So that's kind of where I'm at with that right now.
Because as soon as they hit base pay, they're super unmotivated on PvP. It also brings the whole culture of the company down because all of a sudden they don't care. So like for me personally, when I look at my GMs and I get like the monthly scorecards, I just want to know, is everyone above base pay? Even if there's a couple people like out of like 20 or 30, like I can't, you can't have them under base pay. And so what you can do when they're new is like you can facilitate a lot of stuff. So for example, if you put someone that's new with someone that's experienced, it's going to slow the experienced person down. They're not going to like it because they're going to make less money. So you're probably going to want to boost your trainer bonus for that period of time to make sure that your well experienced person doesn't get discouraged with new people. All right. The next thing is like, okay, during spring rush, they're not making above base pay because it's wet, it's grass is tall, whatever. Great. I'm gonna give a higher percentage on P for P during a period of time. So for us, we do April and May. April and May, we know the grass in our area grows fast and it rains a ton. So I am going to make sure that during that period of time, instead of giving them 25% on P for P, I'm gonna give them 30 or 35%, which
Hmm.
yes, cuts into my margin, but I need them above base pay. So like anytime someone's below base pay for more than one pay period, it's like system failure. Like everything red lights need to be going off. Because if they see base pay, P for P means nothing. And then it's a matter of like even from a pricing perspective, you can get your pricing to high enough to where them doing good means them making $30 an hour. You can't like none of your competition can compete with that. Right now, like 24, 25, sometimes when they're doing good is one thing. But like if the average that they're making is 21 or 22, it's not enough incentive based upon 19.50 an hour for them to actually do anything. Like I want bonuses of 500 or more per paycheck. And so my like the goal becomes like do I need to change my services? Do I need to change my route density and reduce my service area? Do I need to change my pricing? Like if I would go after that as like my first thing is like how can I get the average paycheck to be 25 an hour? Not that being the exception, like they're really good. And that would be like pricing, a service area, service mix. What can I do to make things more efficient, et cetera? Then
Okay.
from a culture perspective, there's a whole different other thing, right? Because like that'll help you retain people. What you don't want to have happen is people make a bunch of money on P4P, that becomes their standard, and then they have months where they hit base pay a bunch. So that's why like having a trainer bonus keeps that from happening. Keep having spring rush like incentive where it's higher motivates them. We also create incentives around like getting 5-star reviews. They get $50 if they get their name mentioned in a 5-star review. We have like all these other little things. If they do an upsell from the app, they get $10. Like it's like guys, it takes you 3 seconds to click a button, you get $10. So you can really bake it in a little bit there from a retention perspective. Attracting them becomes down to you nailing the first part. What I mean by that is we have on a screen and it just has the P4P software up there, and it shows the top 3 earners. Now, in your case, it's going to basically show all your team. But what was really cool is you do an interview right next to that scoreboard, and you point up there and be like, oh yeah, so Bob last week made $27 an hour, Billy made $26 an hour, and Sally made $24 an hour. Yes, it says $19 per hour on that thing, but that's what people are actually making. That becomes your applicate, like how to get applicants.
Hmm.
And the reason I say it is because that's what they're all looking at when they first get started. They're looking at like money. That's like a big thing. Then it becomes like, okay, culture. Do we have team meetings? Is there accountability, et cetera? But like, they're going to look for the money, the dollars and cents the fastest. So it's usually the fastest way to do it. And if you can pay someone $5 to $10 more per hour than the competition, you don't have a hard time finding people
Mm-hmm.
because everyone in your local area will want to work for you.
I'm glad you said that because I'm having trouble selling it to potential hirees or whatever. So like I'll mention that, I'll even say something along the lines of what you said, like no one else is paying this much. And everyone is still just way more comfortable doing it hourly. I'll get on the phone with someone who has no training and they want to start out at 20. And I'm like, okay. And then I'll have the same type of conversation that has training and they're saying, I can't leave where I'm at if I'm not getting paid $20 an hour or more. And then I'll go into the selling of the P for P. And it's still just hard to get people to even trust it, I guess. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's why I do it right next to the board because I can sell P4P until I'm blue in the face. They won't trust me. But if I
Yeah.
have pay stubs of people from last week that made $35 an hour, and then said Bob walks in the office and I, hey Bob, what'd you make on your last pay period? And he tells the person, and I have a leaderboard that shares it all there too. So like our owners, a lot of the ones that came through the 3F program and actually have their pay stubs from there, they keep them. And during interviews, they're like, hey, here's what I made here. Like, these are my actual pay stubs, and they can show them like, yeah, I made $1,000 bonus here. I made 35, $40 an hour here, and like it's real evidence instead of you just selling it to them. I would
Yeah.
also say if they're like, I need $20 an hour, if your base is 1950, can we figure out a way to get above 20 so it looks right in their mind on base pay? And then like, so for example, what's your hourly rate that you're charging customers?
$80 per man hour.
So you hit the 25% rule at 20. Right. So the
Yeah.
25% rule is, as long as your base pay is less than 25% of what you're charging the customer, then you should have a green light. Now, in the perfect world, I'd like to be charging more like $100 an hour and their base pay is 20, because then I know they're going to crush it. They're going to make tons of money on P4P above base pay, which is a retention tool. Right. So the thing is, the challenging part with P4P is you got to have your base pay high enough to attract new talent, but low enough to make sure you don't eat into their P4P dollars once they actually become an employee. That's
Mm-hmm.
the balance. So I think you have enough to like even move it up to 21. And then the goal is like, how do I get the goal becomes how do you get your hourly rate to 90?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you still stay within the 25% rule, but then you attract talent with the base pay, you retain talent with the P4P dollars.
Okay. So the last part of that would be since I just started doing that at last November and the two people I had doing it are gone, I don't have much evidence to kind of bring to the table. Yeah, I can show them those pay stubs. Um, and that's really kind of the only tool I can think of. Should I do what you've suggested in the past in like the P4B university where you just get them on board first, you do it in the background, and then after they've been on for a while and I've tracked it all, I show them, hey, like you could do the P for P system. This is what you could have made last week if you were on P for P.
Yeah, like
Um,
ultimately your base pay on P4P what attracts them. Like that's what they're pacing on because they don't know P4P. They don't believe anything you say. I try to give them evidence. If you don't have evidence, then they're just going to look at the base pay. That's why
yeah.
you're probably going to have to move up to $20, $21 an hour just to attract people. Then
Hmm.
you figure out your pricing model so that way they can make 25 or more an hour on P4P, whether it be like improving route density, improving pricing, etc.
Okay.
So it's certainly possible. I think for now, I would probably tell you if you're really having a hard time getting people to join, you're probably going to have to get them at $21 an hour, get above that 20, make them feel good, but then get your pricing above 85 so you can beat the 25% rule and get them back on P4P. And whether that be you do that now, like if you already set up for P4P, I would still pitch it. I'd give them the little higher base. And even if you told them like, hey, we're raising prices P4P right now, you're not going to make very much, but we're going to track it. We're going to clock in and out of there. And in the future, when I raise prices, you'll make more money.
Hmm. Okay. So that last part of the question though, do you the training systems and interview process, do you have
Mhm.
any suggestions for that?
Yeah. So I'd say first off, when you're doing interviews, if you haven't done a lot in the past, I would recommend having a list of questions and working your way through them. The reason I say this is because a lot of times we get nervous just as much as them and we skip over stuff, we miss things about them because we're just simply nervous. So like we have 17 questions that we literally just like first one, second one, and then they know you're reading it. So they just go along with every question. So
Right.
even though it might be an awkward question, it's like, would it be hard just to say to someone because they know you're just literally reading it and then writing down the answer? They somehow feel like they're just part of this. This is part of the process. And so I would recommend that for anyone that is doesn't have more than like 100 or 200 interviews underneath their belt. Like I don't bring anything to an interview now. But I didn't start that way. Like when I go to an interview now, I literally will sometimes print off their resume, but usually I just go with nothing. But like I also have done enough to where okay, this is the question I need to ask. Then I'm gonna go here, and then I'm gonna like I've done enough. But if you haven't, I would write every single one down. So that you don't miss certain steps because otherwise you're nervous. You'll skip over things. You won't ask the right questions, which will pull out the things that you need to know whether or not this is a good hire.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be very, very systematic with it until you get really comfortable.
Okay, this is my last part. What are
Okay.
some good questions to ask them? Because
So
I have that. I have a list of questions that I ask, and it hasn't been very successful, and that is probably my fault. But do you have any examples?
So reverse engineer what your that you want. So the outcome is, okay, I want people to show up on time. Like what are the biggest troubles you're having with employees now?
Um,
They don't stick around.
that's probably one of them. That's definitely one of them.
Do you know why they're not sticking around or is that not known?
Um, a couple of them, it was because they're young, they don't want to work that hard. This last person was complaining about his back from mulching, and he. I mean, this is a
But
little.
this is perfect, Brett. So what you do, you work backwards, right? So if someone stopped working because they said their back was hurting. Great. Interview question. Is there any physical things that would prevent you from doing X, Y, and Z? Or here's the thing, the tasks inside of our job that we do. Are you okay with performing those actions on a daily basis for 8 to 10 hours out in the field?
Mhm,
Right? Like you can't not hire someone because they had a past ailment. But what you can do is like, here's the requirements of the job. Do you think you can physically do these things? And just say it as it's a question, like yes or no. Another thing is like if they're not showing up on time, it's like, okay, or they're not sticking around is like look in the resume. Like if they've only been at places 3 to 6 months, they're just not going to stay at your place long. Right.
right.
So then it doesn't matter. Okay, I'm going to make sure that when I'm looking through resumes, if they haven't been somewhere for at least 3 to 4 years, I'm just not taking them. Well, you're going to cut out 80 to 90% of your applicants. But if that's the bottleneck, then that's maybe something we do. And then it's a matter of like, well, if it's their first couple of jobs, it's an entry level position, like, okay, great. Then I'm really going to dig into their goals. Like, why are you coming here to work? Like, so like, is this a long-term thing? And then the question is like, well, do you have a position that they can actually grow into? So again, if we're going to take full ownership of this, like maybe people are leaving because it's an entry level position. You teach them really good stuff, and then they're like, okay, cool, I'm going to bounce. Or are we growing the business? Are we giving more opportunity, not just to make more money, but actually move up with the company? That's why like a larger company is usually easier to retain talent because you can simply move people into higher positions.
Hmm.
And so the advantage that you have right now is that you're small, and the disadvantage that you have when it comes to hiring is that you are small. Because not having places to move into people into means you don't retain talent. But what you can do now is becomes in your interview process, you're selling them on the vision,
Hmm.
and then you're seeing how they react to the vision. Because if they're reacting to a 5 year vision, it's like, I don't know, if that's going to be really what I'm looking for. Get rid of them then instead of you onboarding, training them, and then 2 months later they're gone.
Okay.
So clarity around the vision, allowing you to hopefully attract talent that is looking for the longer term, and you can be upfront and honest with like people. Hey, there's just FYI, we're a smaller business. Here's the cons of that. We don't really have anywhere to like move you up into in terms of estimators or general manager, et cetera. And I hate that. I'm trying to grow this business. It's going to take me 5 or 10 years, but my goal is to create it into this thing. And when it isn't this thing, then I would like to be able to hire the people into those positions that have been with me for a long time. Is that of interest to you? And if like,
Hmm.
no, I don't know, like, I've only mowed grass. Well, then this probably this person is going to stay entry level forever, or they're probably going to stick around for 2 months and leave.
Okay.
Right. So I'd be trying to find your 2 or 3 crew members that are like, hey, I'm in it for 5 to 10 years and catch the vision. I want to be your estimator. I want to be your general manager. I want to be your mechanic. And you're like, hey, I'm not hiring that right now, but that's what I want the business to become. And I'm going to share the numbers with you. I'm going to put it up on a board. We're going to track it together. We're going to have offsite meetings about it. And the vision of the company is what I retain. Like that's how I retained all my good people, despite having one location. And that's why I end up franchising the business is to retain people. Someone can move up from pushing a lawnmower to like a landscape crew. Then they can be a landscape lead. Then they could potentially be in the office. Then they could be an estimator. Then they could be a general manager. Well, once you have enough people that are kind of bottlenecks on top of that, either A, you got to pay them more to keep them to stay, or B, you got more opportunity to grow and learn. And so by doing the franchise, it was like, okay, great. I can move people out of the general manager position into sales position for the franchise. I can have owner success manager. Like my leadership team is people that all came through from mowing grass. And so, your regional manager, owner success manager, salesperson, Liz, operations here at command center, it's all people that started from the day, like the very beginning. But the way you retain those people, because I couldn't have retained them if I didn't have the vision at the beginning. So you say, hey, this is where we're going. So if you're in your local market, you're like, hey, we're going to become the biggest business in this area, or we're going to have a $5 million company. And at the $5 million company, this is what it's going to look like. And so you got to paint a very vivid vision to them if you have any chance of retaining an all-star, because they have other options and you likely can't afford to pay a lot. And so the vision is, hey, like you're gonna have to trust me on this one. I'll pay you in 5, 10, 15 years. But here's where we're going. And if you stick along, I'll make sure you're taken care of. And then the way that you keep them on board is you actually live up to the promises and are directionally correct towards the vision. Because if you say that and then you like, this year we didn't really grow, and this year we're not really going to try to expand, and this year I'm going to go on vacation for 3 or 4 weeks, like they don't believe you.
You utilized any tools for employee development from a either sales training or landscaping training, even don't touch those old growth hydrangea type stuff for some of your crew? I mean, is it just mentorship that your guys learn from, or do you have other videos you produce and LMS systems or anything like that?
Yeah. So each role and position is a little different, right? So, when you think about like frontline team members for labor positions, videos, in-person training, ride-alongs, checklists, we really liked like a 2-week checklist of everything they're supposed to do in those 2 weeks. They have a trainer and a trainee. The trainer is compensated and incentivized to ensure that the trainee does all the tasks. They sign off on them. They get compensated. The trainer gets compensated and bonused based upon the first paycheck that employee is solo. Like those are like very much systems around frontline team members. When it comes to outside of that, I would much rather hire talent. People that already they have the hunger to go develop themselves. And if they're not going out and listening to podcasts and watching videos and going to conferences and figuring out stuff for themselves, guys don't want to be around them. And so, I would much rather them be hungry, because I can't teach that. I can teach them how to like click around in the software, or like, hey, how to sell, even like the skill of selling. Hey, when they say this, don't say this. And when they say this, do say this. Like that's easier. But if I say that and tell them that and they don't want to learn, then we have a problem. And so the ability for someone to learn at a higher level and the hunger and craving to improve, like it's our number one value, is continuous improvement or constant improvement. And it is that reason. The reason for that is because if you don't have the desire to improve, you can be given the exact roadmap to success and you'll never be able to succeed. And so, at a higher level, I would say it's constant improvement. I'm looking for someone that's hungry to constantly improve. At a lower level, I am creating systems around checklists, trainers and trainees, in-person hands-on training, and then I'm just tracking every single thing against it.
Awesome.
And then that checklist is defined as like, what does good look like? And the same way it's like, well, I want a good employee. So what do I ask them? Application questions. It just needs to go directly like, okay, what's my best employee? What's the best one look like? And then how do I ask questions that make sure that the person I'm talking to is like this? Go ahead, Ben.
This is a little bit personal. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. But how did you realizing and being able to spend enough time around somebody to realize that you want to spend the rest of your life with them impact the perspective that you have towards business and where you see this going? Because I don't know very much about her. That's probably a good thing on your end. It's good for you. But but I would imagine she's supportive and she wants the best for you. But where how does that kind of tug at your vision for where you saw things going?
Yeah. So for the context of the question, are you like looking to be able to find somebody? Are you single? Like, where are you at?
Yeah, so I have a woman. Yeah, we're together. We've been together for about a year and a half, and
Cool.
we met in college. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. So what's the context of your question for your situation? Are you just curious, or you want to know
Well,
something
I'm
specific?
just wondering, like, I'm just because I know that you were kind of like the solo guy for a while. Like you kind of that was kind of your persona. I've watched a lot of your stuff, man.
Yeah, yeah,
We've been on another training, and I feel like I know you pretty well. But
yeah.
um and it just I kind of didn't see it coming. I don't know. A lot of people, I don't know if they saw it coming. It's kind of like the CRM. It's just like something switches in your brain, and all of a sudden you're on this road now. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, how has that shift? Has it? I'm not concerned as far. I'm not asking it out of concern. I'm just generally.
Yeah.
I'm very curious as to how you've like have you gained insight into what you have? Has it like deepened your drive to want to grow this thing to wherever it is that you want to take it, or like what has it done?
Yeah. So,
That's kind of, I know that's a shotgun of a question, but
yeah, I think it's a matter of like, what do you want out of life? And then how do you reverse engineer that, right? So like, there's certain aspects of, okay, I want to be healthy. Okay, great. So if I reverse engineer that, what's going to be required is I'm gonna have to work out, I'm gonna have to eat healthy. Okay, great. How do I operationalize that? For me, it's like I keep it really simple. I eat meat and I lift heavy things. And then so that's like health. Okay. And it's like, okay, business. Great. I want to become a billionaire so that I can do certain things and be able to give back to certain people. And see an impact in the industry. So like great. What is required for that to happen? Well, I'm gonna have to work, crazy amounts of hours. I'm gonna have to learn a lot. I'm gonna have to get around people that can connect me to the right people. And I'll have to get in those rooms. I'll have to have skills that they don't have, so that they see
yeah,
value in me. And so you just reverse engineer like the goal. So like the goal. Do I want to have kids that will take care of me when I'm 80 years old and like actually care about me existing? Yes. And so like, well, in order for that to happen, I've got to reverse engineer this too, right? And so as selfish as it sounds, it's a matter of then figuring out, okay, are there other people that have goals that are aligned with that? So for example, are there coaches that want to teach? Because I will need their information in order to reach the goal of the business. Are there trainers that can train me how to lift, and or influencers that can train me how to eat healthily? Because that will get me closer to the goal of health. And then the same thing is true with like, in the relationship. Like if the goal is I'm 80 and I have kids and I have people around me that love and support me outside of just a financial commitment, if it's going to be, if that's going to happen and I reverse engineer, I'm going to need to find someone that has goals that align with that, and that also have similar goals in relation to all the other things that I want in my life. And
right,
so, finding that person was something that I, obviously was not something I thought was, expecting, like you said. But yeah, you find the person and you're like, okay, this is
yeah.
this
You
is
don't
aligned
choose
with
it.
the long
I
term
know,
goal, right? So like
right,
the same thing happened like with the coaching side. So I've kind of paralleled it with like health and with business, but like the same thing happened with coaching. Like I wasn't expecting to be able to get Dr. Kashi, and no one can now, but like it was a function of timing, and when the price comes up for your coach, you're like, oh, I don't care. Like this is a function of I know this is required to hit the goal. So like whatever the cost is, whatever. And so the same thing would be true with a relationship, I would say.
right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you got it, man.
All
That was the
right.
first question I've ever got about that. Let's go. In the
Love it.
in the bag.
I just know that it like I know that those two things, business is, I know that Copilot, especially with Augusta, of course, is your blood, but Copilot seems to be like your new baby, and those things can kind of get complicated when it becomes like another person needing certain things from you, and it's sometimes difficult to have all the wires plugged in everywhere you need them plugged in. So
For sure.
yeah,
No, we're still learning. We're still learning. Go ahead,
of
Jeremiah.
course, yeah, never stop.
Yeah, quick question for you. All right, changing gears from that. So, lawn maintenance business, light landscaping, strictly that. Let's say we figure out getting clients and keeping clients happy, and let's even say we figure out hiring employees. What stops me? What's going to be my biggest challenge on the road to a $10 million company?
Yeah. So do you know what the 4L framework is, Jeremiah?
Yes, I've seen your videos on it.
Yeah, so what you basically described here is like you figure out liquidity, you have enough money to go out and advertise. So then you get leads, you have enough customers, and then it's like, well, then I figure out labor. You assume now we find laborers. The next part of the growth engine is leadership. So the skill of training trainers and managing managers is a very different skill than laborers. And so the fun thing that most people will fail at when they hit a million and they've figured out what you just mentioned. And the thing that differentiated them and the $10 million person is many times the last part of the 4L framework, which is leadership. Like, can you lead other leaders? It's a very different skill. They will turn just as much if you're not a good leader yourself. And so, can you have that vision and then get people that otherwise could go build their own thing underneath you to they want to support your visions and goals? Like, is your dreams and goals big enough for theirs to fit inside? And so, the vast majority of people will just not be able to do that. And then it's like, do you optimize at $1 million? Do you go start $2 or $3 million businesses? But like, I would say that's the differentiation, assuming what you just mentioned.
So right now our radius is pretty big. We're probably at like a 15 mile, and for like one-time jobs, like not like recurring jobs. Some of them are even like 20 miles. Obviously there's like no traffic to get there or anything like that. So it's not like, 20 miles takes 50 minutes or anything like that. But like the farthest we've gone, well, there's that one that we just estimated on. It's probably like 45 minutes, but they're getting a ton of stuff. You know, in our situation, I don't know if you have a franchise or one of your own that's in a similar situation that's like pretty rural. I don't know what the mile radius looks like for that. We don't have like set lines on it right now.
Yeah, so like the thing is, if in a really rural area, you're gonna have more drive time if you're doing this huge service area. But if you have your budget hours and your hourly rates high enough, it doesn't really matter, right? So the nice thing about being rural is you have very little competition, so you can dominate on SEO and Google ranking. You should be the only one they see in terms of trucks, and so it just comes down to like if you went into Pittsburgh, you might be able to charge. I'm just gonna make a number up, $80 an hour and win 50% of your jobs, whereas you might be able to charge 100 or 120 out here because simply there's no one else to do the work. So like, is your competition high? Like, do you have a lot of competitors out where you're at, or not really?
No, like we just did like a review campaign like this year, and like before we even did that, we were at like 18 reviews, and now we're at like in the 60s, and that's just far above anybody that would be in our service radius. Once we get to closer to some of the other like suburban neighborhoods, then like there's people with like more reviews that are bigger companies that might have a couple locations. But in our general area, I mean, the only other bigger companies like they do tree service, they do excavating. There's one, they do more retail. They do a little bit of infield work, but they do more retail as far as what's closest to us. But
So
even
I would be
those
really
competitors-
focused. I'd be really focused on your website, really focused on SEO. I'd spend every dollar on your website before you spend it on marketing, because if you can just own all traffic in this area, you can charge substantially more. And so, yes, maybe your drive time is an extra 5-10 minutes on every job, but if you're able to charge $120 an hour instead of $80 an hour when you're on the job site, you're making more money.
Okay, I'm gonna write
And then
that
don't
down.
rule out the possibility that if you're 45 minutes away from Pittsburgh, that you just do move into Pittsburgh. Like, just have your
Yeah,
shop space
that
over
was
in
like,
Pittsburgh. Like, I'm just saying, like, that's a totally different business model. But I'm just saying, like, you doing that is another option.
At what point does it make sense for us to open up that second location? Because ideally, it would just be like keeping this location, maximizing the potential here. The goal, like last year, was 250 in revenue. This year, the goal is 500, and then going from there. I mean, who knows what the actual potential, like what the plateau will be for this? As far as like population restraints, given our like service area. At what point does it make sense to make that second location?
Yeah, so I would say, like, as a hard set rule, I would say once you can take a 2-week vacation in the middle of spring rush and the business continue to grow without you there, that's when you're ready. And when it is so profitable that your tax accountant is trying to figure out ways for you to spend money at the end of the year, despite you having a general manager, then you're ready for a second location.
Okay, that's a great answer.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for coming to the goal session. We will do another one of these in a year together. So keep the document once you filled it out. We will go over it in a year. We'll set up the next year. But looking forward to next week sharing the modern estimates, the new version of that, and then very shortly down the road we will get in the new app. So it's gonna be very, very cool. Be much more simple for your crew, especially. So look forward to it. Hope you all have a fantastic weekend. And we'll see you on the mastermind, on the Facebook group, and in the Copilot universe. Take care, guys. Bye.